Welcome to the Mason Guard Show. Unscripted, uncensored, unapologetic. Hello, Internet. Welcome once again to the Mason Guard Show. I'm Scott Mason.
And I'm Ed Guard.
And we are back with your favorite show, Does It Hold Up? And as part of our Halloween month of horror brought to you by Haunt Manor, we are diving into 2002's The Ring.
Or Ringu, or Ring, or whatever this was made after. This is a really interesting movie because this is an American remake of a kind of classic Japanese horror film, right? This was an interesting one for me. I've never actually seen the full original Ringu. Have you ever watched it?
No.
So this one was interesting for me because I'd never seen the original, but I know a little bit about it, which makes it interesting for me. I only ever watched this movie one time, and it kind of scared the crap out of me in the theater. And then watching it back this time, I realized that I didn't remember anything about it other than the main plot that it was a tape.
There's a videotape in 7 days.
Yeah, you had 7 days. So do you remember anything about this movie?
So I'd never seen this movie until today.
Okay.
This is actually, I'm excited for this because I've been waiting for a movie like this to kind of come along with this show where one of us hasn't seen it. And, because I can actually provide a fresh 2019 kind of take on this movie. So had never seen it. My knowledge of this movie came from Scary Movie. Like, plain and simple, that's all I kind of knew about it was what I'd seen in Scary Movie. I think it's 3 where they parody The Ring.
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, it's interesting. We put out a post this week about, asking if anybody had seen this movie, what they remembered about it. We had some really interesting sort of comments
Some
on
good
it.
responses, yeah.
One person mentioned that they had an old TV sitting in their front foyer, that anytime they passed, they couldn't look at the reflection. Another person, Deanna, threw out that she watched this movie with her mom during the day.
In the middle of the daytime, because didn't want to watch that at night.
And then right at the end of the movie, her phone ended up ringing, which terrified her. And another one, Stevie, threw out that she watched this movie in the theater, but showed up late, right as the screen came up of one of the Ring faces, and she was just terrified and ended up running out of the theater. So some really interesting commentary on people who've seen this movie. Obviously, our fan basis isn't really horror movie driven people either.
Kind of like us, yeah.
Which is interesting.
All right, so let's jump into, I guess, some of the fun facts and interesting bits about this. So The Ring was directed by Gore Verbinski, who had done Mouse Hunt and The Mexican before this, that weird Brad Pitt, Julia Roberts movie.
A huge resume at that point.
Yeah. And then he followed this up with the first 3 Pirates of the Caribbean movies, Rango, and The Lone Ranger. So he clearly fell in love with Johnny Depp somewhere along the way.
And he got an Academy Award for Rango. How does that even happen?
Yeah, I had to look that up because I saw Rango and I did not enjoy that movie at all. And it's really just because the only competition Rango had that year was Kung Fu Panda 2. So I think it just kind of won by default. Gore Verbinski, again, as you can kind of see from that resume, it's a lot of crowd-pleasy kind of movies, but nothing substantial or deep. But that's the director. The writer was, I'm going to get this name wrong, I'm sure, Aaron Kruger. I'm guessing it's just an Aaron, but it's Ehren. And this guy has quite a resume, if you will. We're talking Scream 3, Reindeer Games, Transformers 2, 3, and 4. Most recently, though, he did Ghost in the Shell and Dumbo, which I kind of want to sing one of these things is not like the other when I read out that list.
Ghost in the Shell? No,
yeah, absolutely.
Dumbo. How do you end up with that on your resume? That's crazy. I also was reading about Koji Suzuki, who actually wrote the original novel for this.
That's the book that the Ringu movie was based off of, that this movie was then based off of that. He wrote
Ringu, The Ring, Ring 2, Ring 0, and a number of other Ring movies. I mean, come on, man. think of something else, right?
Yeah, there seems to be a lot of mythology to this. Again, simply because I hadn't seen The Ring until today. I also have not seen any of its subsequent movies, The Ring 2 or was it Rings that came out in 2015?
I mean, I lost track. I mean, the fact that I saw this movie on its own was impressive to me, but when I realized how many sequels that came out after this, I was blown away. It's crazy. But, I mean, I understand why there's sequels. The budget for this movie, $48 million. Mm-hmm. It grossed $249 million. It was the highest grossing horror movie up until 2017 when it came out, which toppled it.
Yeah, horror remake, just to be specific. Because it is, there may have been other horror movies that grossed higher. I just noticed that was used in the terminology there. Highest grossing horror remake until the most recent It movie. That's actually pretty impressive. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the interesting fun facts I learned about it was how they released this movie, which, they were unsure of how it would be received, right? This is a new take on horror for the American audience. So they only released it to a few theaters for its opening weekend. And then when it did well, they're like, okay, we can release it to everybody else. And they opened it wide. And my goodness, I'm pretty sure they're glad they figured that one out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I read that DreamWorks actually bought the rights to Ringu and this story for $1 million. After Gore Verbinski actually has an interesting story how he came across it. He actually watched a dodgy version of Ringu on a VHS tape that was lent to him. So the whole experience really drew him in. And then when they got to the rights for this $1 million, it actually took off. I mean, I think it's an unusual story overall. If you haven't seen this, the concept is there's a cursed videotape that if you watch it, which is weird, the cursed video is probably the creepiest thing about this whole thing when you're watching it. But if you watch it, your phone rings at the end, some person says 7 days, and then 7 days later you die. You die. Somehow. Pretty much.
Which, I mean, if we're going to jump right into this, we might as well jump right into story script here as we're, kind of talking about it now. It's unclear why, how they die. The method of death changes every single time, other than, they kind of die with this weird look on their face, which I'm not going to lie, the first time they show, what's her name? Katie? Katie's the first one who dies, the young teenage girl. Right, when they first show her face, I laughed, I chuckled.
What?
It was a weird look, and again, it just flashed me back to Scary Movie when they show those faces when they die, and that just, again, I'm not a horror guy. Horror movies often do make me laugh, and there's a couple moments in this movie that do. I'm going to call it another one a little bit later, but yeah, immediately right off the bat, I was already chuckling at just the look on Katie's face when she was dead. It's only a brief flash, but it was just enough to get me actually chuckling and completely break any tension that scene was supposed to have.
Yeah, I think, before we get right into the story script here, I mean, there's a few funny things. I read about the lead characters, Naomi Watts included, weren't sure if this movie was going to be scary enough at all. While they were filming it, they were worried that they were just going to look stupid because it wasn't going to be scary.
Right.
I mean, Naomi Watts actually came right off of doing Mulholland Drive for this movie, and I don't know if you've seen Mulholland Drive, but what the fuck is Mulholland Drive about? There's no, it's just one of those movies, and this was another movie that I feel like
when The Ring is your normal movie.
Yeah, you feel like, what is going on with this girl's acting career? How does she choose scripts? So strange. I was reading about Verbinski. Why can't I say it? Verbinski?
Gore Verbinski.
Yeah.
Yep.
He actually didn't have fun making this movie at all because he talked about how making a horror film gets really depressing because you go into darker spaces in your head and then everything just starts to feel dark and sort of not a fun time at all for him. So I think that this is one of those movies where everybody involved was really unsure of how it was going to turn out.
It's not a fun film to make. Everyone's just walking around, hanging their head.
Yeah, it's just, and that's kind of how the movie turned out. But I mean, at the same time, this movie sold 2 million copies the day it was released. Like 2 million copies of this movie. So obviously it was released, like well received by the audiences. People really enjoyed it. The concept was interesting and different for a horror film. So I guess it did well, but an interesting movie. I guess we'll dive into whether or not we found it to be a great movie or not. But the last thing I want to talk about is their marketing ploy before they released this movie that DreamWorks actually denies being a part of.
Which is silly, of course.
So they released a bunch of these tapes that include the sort of the cursed tape on them with information about a website that they released called An Open Letter that includes like some information from people who think Katie's missing and like, this pedophile who is about to die, and we'll get into that more, but it was very unusual. And then right before they released the movie, they took it all down and then denied having anything to do with it. Like, what a weird sort of marketing ploy to go with, especially from a company like DreamWorks.
Yeah, I mean, since you brought it up, we can kind of, jump into why they denied it, which is what it's referencing, they cut from the movie immediately.
Yeah.
Which, for those of you who don't know, Chris Cooper was originally in this movie. Chris Cooper, you may know from American Beauty, obviously a few other films. That's just the first one that comes to mind for me. He was going to play the supposed pedophile who shows up at the beginning and end of the movie, and that's it. Right at the beginning, right at the end, and then disappears. And I think, again, once they realized they had to cut that part, they had to realize that whole open letter
just didn't make any
sense anymore.
Yeah. So I was reading about why they did this. Apparently, test audiences really hate that they identified with Cooper. Like, they recognize him as a famous actor, and then he's gone for the whole film and then back right at the end as one of many multiple endings that they had planned. And so it didn't make sense, and they just cut him right out of the movie. He's even got credits, and I think he's still got some residual income off this movie because he did fully work on it.
I didn't read that. That's funny,
really
though.
Funny that he's got a credit in this movie, but he doesn't turn up.
Never
in the movie.
see him, not even for a second. And honestly, again, as I read it, thank God. This movie went on long enough as it was, and I don't think it needed any more extra scenes on it.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the multiple endings that they cut out. If we're going to talk about this story and how sort of strange it is, he was one. So one of the ways that they were going to ditch the tape at the end so they could pass it off was to give it to this pedophile to stick him with the death. Another one was that they were going to return. They cut out the scene where she's renting some tapes and some people at a video store give her a hard time, and then she actually slips it into one of their staff pick videotapes and dodges it that way. How horrible is that? That is such a bad way.
Awful ending. And again, I don't want to jump the gun, but that's my issue with horror movies. You always got to have this downer ending. But again, I'm jumping the gun a little bit. Let's dive into story. Start from the start. Let's clean up our thoughts here and kind of figure it out. Starts off with the two teenage girls. You have Katie and Becca. Where you stand on that scene? Because I think there's some neat visual stuff in that scene.
I think it was all right. I just, the two teenage girls complaining about TV, it was just weird. And then for them to be startled by a phone call and all of a sudden one's scared by this, tape story that the other one's telling her. And then all of a sudden she happens to actually have been,
been the one who experienced it. And then the joke, with the choking, it just totally didn't make sense, that whole scene. Which then, of course, they fly into that Katie told Aiden as well about this tape. Which, because they were close or whatever, but if she was that worried about it, then why hadn't she told her friend Becca about it?
I don't know. She really acts like it's a joke, but obviously she was concerned about this situation. But what led her to be concerned about it? It doesn't really make sense there.
For a character who's only on the screen for 5 minutes of time, she made my brain hurt real quick. Just because, again, she doesn't have any consistencies to her character, which is a running theme in this movie for me.
Absolutely.
Characters make choices for the plot, not for any actual character consistency.
Yeah, there's a number of things that, her and the relationship, the super close relationship that she may have with Aiden. But, they never show that or develop that. They just have, a mention of it, and then like a picture of on the wall that she made him. Yeah,
I noticed that, and I was like, that's the only thing that connects the two of them.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense at all. There's a lot of pieces of that. Also, like, let's just kind of, all this is just disjointed. So they've headed up to some cottage. They've rented a movie. They're watching the movie. It freaks them out, and then they leave, right?
Yeah.
But they rewound the movie and then brought it back to the office and set it on the shelf that later the woman finds. Like, how did, like,
for some reason, yeah.
Like, why does that happen? I'm not really sure.
How did the tape get there in the first place, I guess, is a question that this movie doesn't answer. Like, this movie gives you a lot of answers to questions that, A, you didn't ask, but then the questions that you are asking, it doesn't answer.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a major problem here. In the original sort of Ringu, this story, one of the main characters who plays sort of like the husband character, like Noah, if you will, in this movie.
The Noah character, yeah.
He's supposed to be clairvoyant. And the way that they're tracking them down is through his clairvoyance, and like that's how they're kind of solving the mystery. In this, it's just like crazy looking at newspapers.
Super journalism.
Yeah.
That's really how a lot of the mysteries are solved in this is, I'm just a reporter. It doesn't make sense. I was watching it with my girlfriend who said, how does she do all this in 7 days? How does she put this giant mystery that no one has solved for however long and solve this in just the 7 days? Like,
the weird thing about it for me is, like, is it supposed to be a mystery? Like, is she supposed to be solving it? Like, is it a riddle that you can solve? That's what I'm confused by. Like,
well, the movie seems to hint that, right? Like, that this is a trail of breadcrumbs left by Samara to get her to be released, right?
Right.
Like, that's, I guess, how we're supposed to believe this is. But again, it doesn't make any sense, because if that's your intention, why are you killing people?
Yeah, but like, okay, so is she, it's trying to get her released, but like, why? Like, it's not stopping her from killing people. You know what I mean? Like, she's already killing people. Is she, like, does she have more powers now that she's out of the well? I don't understand.
Yeah,
like,
I don't know,
is she
right?
trapped? Why is she trapped? Like, could she not come out of the TVs before? Because it seems like she was killing people pretty well.
Yeah, she seemed to be doing just fine.
Like,
She got Katie.
I
She
just
got
don't understand what the whole
four of them.
point was. And like, at what point did she sort of solve that she needed to make a copy? Like, was that part of the riddle, or was that just by chance? Like,
again, I think it is by chance, and the reveal on that to me is so awkward. Like, it really kind of doesn't explain why making a copy prevents you from the curse. Like, I don't follow
because, like,
that logic whatsoever.
When it was sort of like revealing that, it was like her own voice saying things that she was playing back in her head, which is normally like you're playing back something else that other people said, and you're like, oh, that makes sense. But it's like things that she, like,
my own words
she discovered. Yeah, it was like really weird. And like, if you have a videotape that you think is going to kill you, you don't just fucking leave that lying around your apartment.
Where your kid is gonna fucking find it. I agree with that one too. It was one of those moments. I'm like, where did you leave that?
Yeah, like, that is super irresponsible.
Even on a high shelf, girl. Come on,
put it away. This is your fault.
You
like,
have a
feel
child.
Guilty, feel bad about this. Yeah. So I found that to be strange.
Yeah, I don't understand why Aiden can interpret some of Samara's messages. Like, he seems to have this
connection,
connection with her.
He's already just weird,
which just doesn't. Yeah, just because he's a weird kid, I guess. And then he's the one who's like, "Oh no, you let her out." Like, how did he understand she was evil and the grown-ups didn't figure that out? Like,
yeah, I don't know.
I have a lot of questions when it comes to the script of this movie, but I mean, all in all, it's a horror movie. Most of them don't make sense, and maybe I'm just callous against the genre, but again, it just kind of feels, okay, this is what horror does, right?
I just feel like the problem with this movie... Okay, I'm going to tell you about my favorite part of this movie.
Okay.
Is at the end, where you think that this is a riddle, and that the whole objective is save her.
Yeah.
And then, and then everyone's saved. And then it's like, oh no, she's just fucking crazy. You made a mistake. She, like, letting her out's even worse. That is my favorite twist of this whole movie. I do like that they just, like, tried to make her sympathetic all of a sudden, and then realized, Nick, nah, she's just bad. Like, and it's that sort of last act of the movie that's just trying to over-explain that, and nothing really comes of it. Because at the end of the day, fine, she's a ghost. Something horrible happened to her. and now we figured it out and we've helped her. But we never actually get the answer as to what the hell is wrong with her. Is she already just a demon of some sort? Like, what exactly is the deal with her? What's the deal with the X-ray photograph? Like, what the fuck was that about?
She can just burn images onto those.
Think of them and then they are? Is that what the comment was? Like, what the hell is that? Yeah, I found that very strange.
And then is that a power she has? Is she can think of things and make them be? I get that doesn't make sense. I do want to go back just a brief moment here because I really disagree with you on that being the best part of the movie. That was the part I was ready for the movie to be over, and that dragged it on an extra 10, 15 minutes.
Oh, shit.
And I'm like, oh, God, really? Why can't she just be good? That's a happy ending, and we can all go home. And that's, as I say, my problem with a lot of horror movies is they get you to a nice, satisfactory conclusion, and then they're like, ha ha, fuck you.
I think that we've established previously that I like a good dark ending to things, though, and I was worried that this was just going to be like, oh, she's fine, we saved her, and now everything is good, which wouldn't have made sense because, like, she was already a demon. Like, none of that made sense to me at that point because that's the questions I was asking, which they never did answer.
I like a dark ending when it's earned. And to me, this isn't a movie that earns a dark ending. We like Naomi Watts. She is a good person. We like Aiden. He's weird, but, we feel bad for the guy, right? Like, it doesn't, you don't earn that dark ending with these guys. Samara, we don't even know anything about her, so why, like, we're not rooting for this or cheering against it. It just feels tacked on. Like you say, they had how many different endings lined up, and they're just like,
obviously didn't know
this one, I guess. Like, and that's what it fucking feels like to me. With this movie, it's just that's that end. I just don't get it. I don't like it. So yeah, I disagree with you immensely on that.
Like that's the only interesting thing that happened in the whole movie for me was that moment of like, no, she's just bad. But I get what you're saying. I understand why that movie was coming to an end. I mean, I didn't like the whole story between Rachel and Noah.
Oh.
Like, I didn't... Whatever the...
Unnecessary,
It was
completely.
just nonsense. Like, does he not know that's his son? Does the son not know that's his dad? Like, the initial scene when they run into each other, do they not know each other?
When they first have that reveal and it's halfway through the movie, I'm like, wait, what? Like, how is there no indication? Like, none of their wordplay between them at any point was like, hey, how's my son?
Yeah, because they're just like, do these people not talk all the time? Because you get the impression that they're just like on and off again, friends.
And it was, it's done for reveal, which again, I think a lot of this movie is played for the moment it's in. As I say, you have characters who do things to further the story. You have beats in the movie that are just to further the suspense or make you jump or create fake drama. And that's just, as I say, emblematic of the problems with this movie right there.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, let's just take a second and recognize Brian Cox and his 4 minutes in this film that come about an hour in. He's just like super intense and then has a super intense scene for no reason.
I had a note here going, why did he hit her?
Oh, no, I don't know.
He walks in on her watching the tape, smacks the hell out of her just to pick up the TV and run away. Like
with like an extension cord?
Like, I think you could have just gone and picked up the TV.
That's
she wasn't going to
TV.
stop you from picking up the TV if you wanted to. It's your TV, Mr. Cox.
Just like, in your house.
But he just wanted to hit her, I guess. So many nonsensical things. Again, that's where I fall with this.
But this was 2002, and Brian Cox was like in everything
yes.
at that time.
He absolutely was. All right, we have gone on, I think, enough about the story of this movie. Wow, we really crapped all over this movie. Where do you land for a score on story script? I think we may know.
Like a 2, I guess. I guess a 2.
A 2? I think a 2 is generous. Again, for me, I think it's a 1. There's a fun concept in here somewhere, but I think the movie trips over its own feet trying to find it. Yeah. It really doesn't know what it wants to be, and we'll get into that, I think, a little bit later. So for me, again, story script, it's cliche, what is there, and everything that doesn't make sense, it just, I can't. It's a jumbled mess.
I think
me trying to talk about it, I sound like an idiot.
It's just so sad, It's just so sad. Like, everything about her is just sad. Like, she's a bad mom. The other woman was a bad mom. Maybe that's the message. I don't know. All right, let's move on.
I argue she's not a bad mom, and that was kind of part of the point of this movie, you know? But maybe I'm missing the point on that. But let's move on. Let's jump into aesthetic. Because actually here I think is where some of the highlights of this movie actually come in. There are some great visuals throughout this movie. Whether it's the shot of the well, I think when they first discover it underneath the floor, that's one I really enjoyed. The look as the well is being covered, you know, when they're down in it towards the end, I think there's some great visuals there. The tree up on the hilltop, when the sun first catches it, I like it. Although I don't like how it somehow magically also lights up her hotel room red from, you know, half a kilometer away.
That's not how anything works.
No, that's not physics. What about you? Where do you stand on aesthetics on this?
So I also thought there were some really cool things. I like that they tinted the entire movie green. So you'll notice that effect throughout the entire movie, where you often see like a blue or a lighter color tint to these type of movies. They went with green and had that sickly dark feel. Now that worked out great because this movie was filmed in Washington, and the entire time they were filming, it rained the whole time. So it's almost every single shot that you'll see outside is raining, which I think is, you know, fantastic for this dark, sad
adds the atmosphere
film,
for
right?
sure, yeah.
Which also added a lot to the cinematographer, whose name was Bojan Bazeli, I believe. He actually took advantage of the fact that there wasn't a lot of bright sun and removed almost all the shadows of all the characters throughout this movie, which gives them
that's a neat
the effect of like almost floating through the scenes, which I found really interesting as well. You know, they added tons of visual effects, like the fact that the rings are actually everywhere throughout this film in a lot of different ways.
I read that note as well. You know, they use a lot of rings imagery, and I'm like, yeah, there's just a lot of things that are circles. Like, I don't think it's as intelligent of a thought as we want to think it is. I think some of it's just, you know, they shot circles because the movie's called The Ring. Like, they didn't use it for neat visual imagery. The items that are circles aren't significant. So that's where I'm just like, I think this is more just, hey, that's a circle. Get me a close-up shot of that.
Yeah, you're probably right. I think that it's interesting that they included it. Like, on watching it the second time knowing this, I was looking for it more. So I guess maybe when you're looking for something, it's like a yellow car, right?
Yeah.
If you're looking for a yellow car, you're going to see a yellow car, right?
Right.
Maybe it's that effect, which I found interesting. The constant overlays of the ring throughout the movie are kind of cool. Like, for example, there's no title screen for this movie.
Right.
The Ring.
Neat
There's
touch.
just a half-second cut in the DreamWorks logo of The Ring, which I found interesting.
Yeah.
And then it happens a few times throughout. I know one of your favorite scenes, it happens with the horse.
Yeah. Oh, man. Give me a second to collect myself, because honestly, the scene on the horse where she's taking the ferry across, again, I had some trouble with this, trying to take this movie seriously, trying not to laugh, but when she's, just trying to comfort that horse while it's freaking out, it's like, just get away from the horse,
why
woman.
are you doing that?
For one, just step away.
That's not your horse.
Don't stand at the horse and yell loudly. Like, that's only going to make it worse. But then when it gets out and it does that run right towards her, and she drops down and it does the jump and then trips over the front of the ship and takes that America's Funniest Home Video style CG fall off the boat, I literally burst out laughing in my living room. I couldn't stop. I had to pause the movie because I was just laughing too goddamn hard. And I know I can't be the only one.
So,
it doesn't look good.
So it was reminiscent of, do you remember the scene in Titanic when the end of the movie, when the boat's sort of up on its side and the guy falls off and hits the propeller?
Yes. Also a moment where I burst out laughing in a theater at a completely inappropriate moment.
Like, oh my God, that was amazing. Yeah, the whole horse scene was just effed up. You know what I mean? Obviously, they're trying to portray the different scenes that are in that dodgy mood, the cursed videotape throughout, and one of them was the bloody water, right? Just painful. It was a painful sequence.
It was a painful scene.
The point of bringing that up was that right after the horse hits the water, it flashes to the ring, showing that the horse would have seen the ring before it died, or whatever the deal is with the ring.
Right. For me, again, a lot of great visuals, but I want to call attention to the fact that, again, this movie doesn't trust its audience to know what it's doing. every single time she saw something that was from the video,
Oh, and then it clips
had
back.
to give you a flash of the video, and I'm like, come on.
Yeah.
We get it.
We can
see the
remember.
mirror.
Yeah.
We remember there's a mirror in the video. You hold on it for about 30 seconds. Like, we good. And that's just, again, I think my problem with... I'm going to argue, actually, it's Gore Verbinski, I think. Like, I think that's more his style, is just someone who doesn't trust his audience to remember what happened 10 minutes ago.
Yeah, it was the same thing. I was uncomfortable with the title cards for the days. Being like, just reminding, like, okay, fine. Even if you just put Wednesday, I could have counted down myself.
Figured it out.
Yeah. I don't need it.
Day 2, day 3.
Yeah, I felt
and right
that
in the
was
middle
same
of
way.
the screen, like, at least movies nowadays have learned to put that stuff in the bottom of the screen.
Yeah,
like, it didn't need to be in the middle. Again,
Yeah.
just doesn't trust his audience to be intelligent.
Yeah, or if it just was like a pop on the screen, like a cigarette, like marker, you know what I mean? That would have been fine
Yeah.
for me. Just something that you could have noticed, or was sort of like a, if you're paying really close attention, you would have noticed it, rather than just like bold right in your face, like, she's only got 2 days left.
I think there's some things that don't hold up visually. Obviously, when she's looking at the computer, it really likes to hold on old internet technology, and let me show a close-up of the mouse button hitting the search button twice in this movie. Like, again, just unnecessary shots of surfing internet.
My favorite one is that if you watch closely on one of like when she's scrolling through old like newspaper articles, one of them shows a date, and then it has like obviously a writer's note that says "or whenever" in bold letters.
I didn't see that. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Or whenever. All right, well, that's fantastic. Or whenever. I'm literally gonna have to go and watch that right now after we're done this here. All right. So that's what I want to say. Again, I think there are some really good aesthetics. I think every once in a while there's a shot where you're just like, oh, that was really nice. But on the whole, not a lot to write home about. And again, the fact that the movie does treat you like an idiot. I want to land on a 3 for this one. Again, I feel this could have been a 4 or 5 if it just had a little bit of faith in its viewers.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I wish that I was just talking about Bazzelli's effort as a cinematographer for this movie, because he really tried hard to make this something special. I just think you said it perfectly. There's just no faith in the audience. The one piece that I wanted to bring up before we move on is how terrifying that little kid David Dorfman is. What the hell is wrong with him? I don't even understand. He's just a crazy looking kid.
I'm pretty sure before each scene, Gore Verbinski just walked up and said, "I just killed your cat."
Yeah, or just like screamed at him or something, just to put him in that like terrifying headspace.
Put headphones on, put death metal, turn it up to 11, just, all right, now go.
Yeah, like you're going to watch this weird video every time before I talk to you. That could be the case. But anyways, yeah, I completely agree. The aesthetic of this movie, I put it as a 3, just because there was some real creativity for making this film. But again, just weird in the end.
And, before we move on from aesthetic, we should actually address the video itself. I know you said it's got some of the more cool imagery that you find. I'm on the other side. It reminded me, I know you're an Office guy like me, it reminded me of Gabe's Halloween video.
But I think that was
which again just makes me chuckle and laugh.
Yeah.
It's all this just abstract imagery, which is supposed to be creepy, but like, when is a ladder ever a scary thing?
Yeah, I don't know if it was the latter ones that was really scary. Some of the other parts that were weird.
Oh no, there's a fly! Like, again, just none of those images really creep me out. Maggots don't creep me out. Like, none of that made me feel unsettled.
I just want to bring up the fact that if I send this guy a picture of a clown, he gets fucking mad at me for 3 days, alright? And he's not scared of the maggot pictures.
I'm still not over the cost is correct.
Alright, yeah, so again, this aesthetic falls on a 3 for me. You're right, there's some interesting parts, there's some, disappointing parts to this. I can see why the curse video for you is kind of like, that's lame. But I thought that, of the imagery in this movie, that piece was uncomfortable. Like, it is, you must have some sort of gut, like, oh, this is weird when you're watching it. Maybe, maybe it's just me. But I absolutely thought that, if I sat down and that came on my TV, it would be messed up. Now, one piece we can mention is that on the DVD release of this, you can actually select to watch the cursed video. But if you do select it, you can't stop it.
That's a great touch, actually.
What an interesting touch
That's
that
a
is.
nice touch. I give them credit for that. And at the end, they play the phone sound.
Right
yeah,
after,
absolutely. Which actually, dude, they gave away VHS copies of the uncut thing at certain movie premieres. Yeah. You can sit down in your seat and have a VHS sitting there waiting for you. I think that's a neat little touch,
That is a cool touch.
All right, but actually, what you were saying there actually feeds really well into our next category of soundtrack, because what unsettled me, I learned in this movie, is the sound. So there's some really... They just use sounds that unsettle you, is what they do, and it's smart, right? You have TV static used very regularly to unsettle you. No one likes that noise, right? No one likes that noise. They use a subway train at one moment, the high pitch itself during the tape while it's playing, right? They use a lot of that to make you feel uncomfortable. There's an old phone ring, right? Which, again, in 2002, even that style of phone ring had been gone for 5 years, so it's just loud and alarming. That's where I got unsettled, was, again, through the sound. And that's really what this movie did a lot. Any of its real scares just came because it yelled at you.
Yeah, you're right. I think that when we are moving into soundtrack, I think that the effects that they use from an audio perspective are definitely sort of one of the best parts of this movie. I completely agree. And also Hans Zimmer, the guy who did the score for this movie, he does a great job.
He does
a great job. I mean, I was even just talking about the list of things he's done. Notably, you know him from The Lion King, the new one and the old one. He got an Academy Award for that. He did Twister, True Romance, funny ones like Cool Running, or all the Batman movies.
Cool Runnings. I didn't know he did Cool Runnings.
It's interesting to throw that one in that list.
I like that.
I mean, that list goes on and on, but like he's also on for the new Wonder Woman movie. He's also doing the new Dune, the Top Gun.
Nice.
He's also doing the new SpongeBob SquarePants movie, which I thought was fantastic. These are all supposed to come out in the next year.
He must have done the old Top Gun too, I'd imagine.
I would imagine
that
so.
Probably was a Zimmer, wasn't it?
This guy is incredible at what he does, but again, it's a score, so it's not like those anthems that I always talk about. But when this guy does
especially
a job,
not for a horror movie, you don't have that theme.
Yeah, I mean, he does a good job at what he does, and this movie has a good score because of it. It's unsettling, the music is intense when it needs to be, it's lighthearted when it needs to be, but it gets you, it has the effect that it's supposed to have because he does a great job at what he does. Mm-hmm. But other than that, what can you really say about the soundtrack of this movie? Not too much.
Not a lot, honestly, and I think, again, part of that falls to what horror is. Horror, a lot of the way you create tension in a scene is you remove all sound, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of the scenes in this movie have no soundtrack. That's I would argue probably about half the running time. There's absolutely no soundtrack, no score, no nothing going on in the background. So
just the 15 scenes of them pushing a video cassette into a freaking thing. Like, how many times did that happen? So many times.
Way too many times. Yeah. All right. So as I say, I think, again, there's some good sound design in that regard. The soundtrack, sure, the score has its couple good moments for me, but nothing that I'm going to remember tomorrow even. So I landed on a 2 for soundtrack on this one.
Yeah, I'm right there with you too. Zimmer, like, you do a great job, man, but this just wasn't, this one just had nothing to say about this one. Yep.
And when you rely on your noise to scare people, again, that just automatically loses a point for me. Again, in horror movies, it's hard enough to scare me as it is, and when you're relying on just... They were literally doing it in between scenes. Like, it was the scene transitions would just be loud noises to make you jump. And I'm like, why do you want a jump scare?
Nothing.
For a scene transition. That's not where a scare should go in a horror movie.
And it was Cox who had the funniest, scariest scene in the whole movie when he shows up with that, like, extension cord.
Dressed in his suicide machine thing going on there. All right. Oh, man, I can't even take that seriously. All right, let's jump into our final category here, which is progressiveness, where we talk about, again, it has been 17 years since this movie was made. Some people's sensibilities have changed. We have become a much more politically correct society. So, Ed, did you find anything in this movie that today's audience would find offensive?
I mean, I didn't really find too much. I mean, here's what I did like. In the original movie, it's a male character who's sort of solving all the mysteries. It's the husband. He's clairvoyant. He's kind of spoon-feeding his wife all the answers of what's happening.
Right.
In this one, obviously, it's the Rachel character who's figuring out all the mysteries, and Noah's just kind of along for the annoying ride.
Yeah, just kind of there.
You know, constantly calling her. And, like, okay, one last problem. Like, if they've all got cell phones, why the hell is the ghost not calling their cell phone, is always calling the landline near them, or someone else's landline?
Yeah,
And
they do show actively that they have cell phones. That's a good point, that they put those in the movie.
Call the cell phone. Anyways, maybe they don't have the cell phone number. Who knows? Who's on the phone?
More questions that we just never get an answer to.
So, you know, I do like that they made her the lead. I do like that she solved the mystery. I like that she overcame all the problems. You know, single mother. You know, that was great.
It feels like a female empowering kind of movie, and I can certainly see how you would get that out of it as well. I do think there's probably a studio note at the end that throws a little bit of that out the window when the two of them will hold hands at the end. Or towards the end, right in the back of the truck, and, you know, Aiden smiles about it, and it's just like, I felt that was very unnecessary. I think Naomi Watts' character probably works better without that, like that this has been her resilience. She feels good about what she's done. She didn't need Noah to do this. You know, she saved Samara, and in that moment, that's what she should be feeling. And I think, if anything, they really did it just for the cheap emotions to get at the end when she comes and finds Noah's still dead. Like, it just felt like a cheap throwaway for what I could argue would have been a progressive thing.
Yeah.
It throws it away at the end, so I can't really give it that credit.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from. I mean, I didn't really see anything else in the movie. I didn't find anything, like, offensive.
No, yeah, there's nothing offensive. Again, whitewashed, surprise, surprise, early 2000s. You do have the video librarian who's there, but, you know, he's not necessarily a great portrayal. And then there's the woman who chides him about smoking.
Yeah, in the convenience store, and that's pretty much
other than that, you got your whitewashed. One unnecessary underwear scene, which just, you know, again, feels just a little bit out of place in 2019 for me. It's just like, it didn't need to be like that. So, as far as progressiveness goes, again, I land on a 2. I feel like I wanted this to be a 3, literally up until that moment where they hold hands. And then I'm like, nope, you lost your points that I was going to give you for being somewhat progressive and having a real female protagonist without the male, without needing that. She has scenes with other women where they're just talking about, you know, stuff and what's going on. Could have been great, but it throws it away at the end. Yeah,
I landed on a 3 because it was really middle of the road. I also noticed that, like, there was the sort of female doctor when she reached out to, so that was another thing where it was going for that female empowering.
The female doctor and the video technician, which is why, again, I wanted to give it credit. It felt like it was trying to be female empowering, just fell short in the end.
Yeah, I ended on a 3 just because there was nothing that really I felt was insulting or offensive, but there was nothing really other than that.
All right. Well, let's jump right into the end here where we talk about our overall enjoyment of the movie. We've always said before, a movie can get 1s or 2s throughout the whole thing, and we still end up with a 5 because we had a lot of fun. As you've probably figured out listening to this show, this movie is not one of those movies. Ed, why don't you jump in with overall enjoyment?
So this was, you know, when I first watched this movie, it was good. You know, in the theater the first time, it was an intense movie. I was still watching sort of the scary movies as they came out when we went out to the theater, but, you know, watching this one again, it's hard to really give us any credit. I am going to land on a 2, and I feel like maybe that's generous. You know, there are some creative ideas here. It just, and although the execution, you feel like it should be there because of some of the work that went into this. It's just not a great story. Not enough answers, or too many answers. I'm not sure where you try
somehow both. Like there's the
somehow
problem.
both. And that's where I landed. I gave it a 2.
Yeah, I'm actually in the 2 category as well. And again, I think what it comes down to for me is this is a movie that didn't have a plan. I think if you came in here and shut your brain off, watch literally just what's happening in front of you in that moment, lived in the moment of the movie, you might get away with it. But as soon as you start thinking about it, as soon as you're like, wait, what about that scene that happened 10 minutes ago? things start to fall apart. And it just feels like either the studio got too deep involved or Gore Verbinski himself is just such a shill for the way studios make things, which again, when he goes on to make the Pirates movies, it kind of feels like it may just be Gore Verbinski. Maybe I'm just harsh on the Pirates movies, but I've never been a big fan. So for me, it just feels like a movie that doesn't trust its audience to be as good as this movie actually could have been. I think if you had someone who trusted their audience to make this movie smart, someone like a Denis Villeneuve nowadays trying to make this movie, I think it actually could have been really great. But that potential was thrown away for a cheap little cash in on a Japanese product that, hey, maybe we'll take North America by storm. And they did. They absolutely did for a while. We got flooded with young pale kids haunting us for about 5 years after this, right? Like The Ring, The Grudge, there was what was that other one with the creepy boy?
I don't know. All those movies. Oh, there's so many.
Yeah, like you crawled on the ceiling and stuff.
I think that was The Grudge. Wasn't that The Grudge?
Was The Grudge? I thought The Grudge was still a girl. I could be wrong. I didn't watch any of these, as you can tell.
Oh, maybe I don't know. Anyways.
Yeah.
You're right, though.
Let us know in the comments below, guys. This has been another episode of Does It Hold Up? And I think we're landing on no. You could probably find a better horror movie. Again, if you're a horror fan, maybe it is. Maybe it is just the fact that we don't like horror and some of the cliches that the genre brings. But I don't think for either one of us that we got value out of our time today watching this movie.
No, absolutely not. There's just better stuff out there. I think more creative to really. If you're going to sink your teeth into this kind of story, there's just better stuff.
From what I've heard from most people, again, just go watch Ringu.
Yeah,
like go find the Japanese movie. Yeah, like it's better as it is. So, all right, guys, thank you once again for tuning in to Does It Hold Up? We want to say thank you once more to Haunt Manor for sponsoring us this month. As for next week's Does It Hold Up, if you check out our Facebook page, within probably a few hours of this going up, you should see a poll for next week's Does It Hold Up. We're going to have 2 classic horror comedies facing off. So you guys let us know whether you want us to talk about Ghostbusters or Hocus Pocus. Once again, check that out on our Facebook page. I've been Scott Mason.
I've been Ed Gard.
And we'll see you next time.